Honourable members, a division has been called on Government Motion 7, moved by the Honourable Government House Leader. If you are in favour, please stand now.
The Honourable Mr. Sigurdsson, the Honourable Mr. Nicolaides, the Honourable Ms. Schultz, the Honourable Mr. Williams, the Honourable Minister Lagrange, the Honourable Mr. Horner, the Honourable Mr. Scow, the Honourable Mr. Ellis, the Honourable Mr. Amory, the Honourable Mr. Newdorf, the Honourable Mr. Lowen, the Honourable Mr. Wilson, the Honourable Mr. Jean, the Honourable Mr. Dreeshen, the Honourable Mr. Nixon, Mr. Wright, Mr. Rosewell, the Honourable Mr. Turton, the Honourable Mr. Yassin, the Honourable Ms. Furr, the Honourable Mr. Jones, the Honourable Mrs. Sawney, the Honourable Mr. Hunter, the Honourable Mr. Nally, the Honourable Mr. Long, the Honourable Mr. McDougall, the Honourable Mr. Boytchenko, Mr. Stephan, Mr. Van Dyken, Ms. Pitt, Mr. Sear, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Wiebe, Mrs. Sawyer, Mr. Getson, Mrs. Petrovic, Mr. Lunty, Mr. Yao, Mr. Dick, Honourable Ms. Armstrong-Homenuk, Mr. Young, Mr. Bouchard, Mr. Singh, Ms. Lovely.
Members, if you are opposed to Government Motion 7, please stand.
Mr. Nenshi, Member El-Maliki, Ms. Al-Junaid, Member Arkan Paul, Honourable Mr. Sabir, Mr. Haji, Honourable Mr. Agan, Honourable Ms. Gray, Ms. Pancholi, Mr. Ellingson, Member Callahoo Stonehouse, Mr. Shepherd, Ms. Sweet, Ms. Wright, Honourable Mr. Guthrie, Member Kayandi, Ms. Renault, Ms. Chapman, Member Eremenko, Mr. Kozowski, Honourable Ms. Ganley, Member Gurinder Brar, Mr. Ip, Member Irwin, Member Batten, Member Tejada, Ms. Hayter, Member Boparai, Honourable Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Gertej Brar, Honourable Ms. Sigurdsson, Ms. Goring, Honourable Member Sisi, Mr. Dack, Member Miyashiro, Dr. Metz.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion 44, total against 36.
Government Motion number 7 is carried. Honourable members, pursuant. I'll do that.
Government Bills and Orders for second reading. Bill 2, Back to School Act. Adjourned debate. Honourable Mr. Horner.
Okay, I was all put me in, Coach. Honourable members, pursuant to Government Motion 7, agreed to earlier this evening, not more than 1 hour shall be allotted to any further discussion and consideration of Bill 2, Back to School Act in second reading. The Honourable President of Treasury Board and Minister of Finance. The Honourable Opposition Leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. What a first day of work this is. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, I did not expect. This is not what I planned. This is not what I planned.
Only one person has the floor. That person will be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, this is not the remarks I had planned for my first remarks rising in the House. Maybe you'll hear those tomorrow. But this is remarkably important work that I want to address Albertans, parents, teachers, students, but in particular, I'd like to address the members opposite. And as I today speak a little bit about education, a little bit about what got us here, a little bit about this government, and a little bit about the egregiously anti-democratic acts that we are about to see, I hope that all of us in this legislature reflect on that. Every one of us, and the member for Edmonton Ellerslie and I and the member for Olds Didsbury Three Hills are the most recent ones, but every one of us were elected by our neighbours, by our colleagues, because they wanted us to do the right thing for them. And every one of us entered this House, as I did just last week, bright-eyed and hopeful and optimistic. And last week, I stood up in front of the Speaker for the first time. I had practiced. I knew what was going to happen. I knew what I was supposed to say. But I felt myself overwhelmed by the fact that fewer than 1,000 people in the history of this province have had this remarkable opportunity. the opportunity for their neighbours to say to them, even for a minute, we're entrusting you. We're entrusting you with our hopes and our dreams. We're entrusting you with our fears. We're entrusting you with building a future for ourselves, for our children, and for our grandchildren. So as we go through today, and as in the wee hours of the morning, this legislation likely, perhaps, will finally be jammed through, I will ask through you, Mr. Speaker, to all my colleagues in the House to ask themselves, was it worth it? Is this what we wanted when we were first elected? And particularly for the members opposite, how do they feel about forever being tarnished in their own political legacies by being part of the first government in Alberta's history to override the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in advance?
Shame.
To actually say, we know that what we're about to do is blatantly unconstitutional. We know this. We're not going to wait for the courts to rule on it. We're saying it in advance. It's the only reason one uses the notwithstanding clause preemptively. But I'll come back to that. The members opposite know full well they're about to pass an unconstitutional piece of legislation. That's why the notwithstanding clause is in it. And we never had to be here. The Premier and her cabinet did not need to put the members opposite in this position. There are so many better ways to have achieved what we are achieving. And you know, the minister in moving this motion spoke beautifully. He really did. He spoke honey-coated words about respect for teachers and the need to get students back in school and the irreparable harm of learning loss. We on this side agree with all of that. But what this government has not done is show in their actions that respect. I'll be blunt. We are in the midst of the largest public sector strike in Alberta's history. It was completely avoidable. When a government screws up this badly, there are typically only two reasons: malice or incompetence. And I encourage us to think about how, in this case, perhaps the government has done something rare, and both of those things are true. But I'll steal a little bit from my conversation that I'll be having with you tomorrow for a moment here and tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up poor, sometimes very poor. I didn't have any privilege. I grew up in a very working-class neighbourhood in northeast Calgary. But I also grew up in a community that believed in me. I grew up in a province that believed that this kid from northeast Calgary, whose parents worked 16, 17, 20 hours a day, who made change in his family's laundromat, who cleaned toilets in his family's motel in Red Deer County, was still worth investing in. Everything I am and everything I have is because of public education. Everything I have and everything I am is because Peter Lougheed made a brash promise the year I was born. And that promise was that here in Alberta, barely 2 million people, in the middle of the often frozen Canadian prairie, we would have the best public education system in the world.
Yeah.
And we did. I remember when I was a media commentator, I commented on the Minister of Primary Care's commentary when she pointed out that Albertan students in 2018 ranked in the top 5 in the world in science, in math, and in reading. How quickly things change. In a mere 6 years, we have seen the quality of public education in this province decline substantially, considerably, and terrifyingly. And again, I'll come back to the previous question. Malice or incompetence? In a mere 6 years, we've gone to the lowest per capita funding of public education in the country. In a mere 6 years, we've seen class sizes that we have never before seen. We have seen complexity beyond anything that we have ever seen before. And our kids suffer. I'm not even comparing what students today are going through to what I went through a million years ago. Premier and I graduated in the same year. That was a long time ago. I'm comparing the kids today to what their older siblings had 3 or 4 years ago. You know, the minister has several times today blamed it on this completely unexpected influx of people. 91,000 new students. Let me tell you something, Mr. Speaker. It was this government that offered signing bonuses to come here. It was this premier who said, I want Red Deer to be 1 million people. Now, I grew up in Red Deer, and I think the members for Red Deer North and Red Deer South might agree with me that that's probably a bit much. It was this premier who said, we want Alberta to have 10 million people. We want to double in population. Did she think no one was listening? Did she think no one was paying attention? Yet, again, malice or incompetence, this government completely failed to plan. We've heard a lot about the New Democrats' record on public education, and I'll remind the House and remind the members opposite that in 4 years, when we were in government, that government built or modernized over 200 schools. Even the minister's pipe dream plan is fewer schools than that, and I'll come back to that. The UCP cancelled that program. In the 6 years that they've been in power, not even 70 schools have been built or modernized. And much as we've heard over and over and over again about the $8.6 billion and the 200,000 student spaces, I'll remind this House that the 2025 budget, with its 3-year forecast on construction funding, allocated precisely $0 to construction of any of those schools. $0.
Shame.
They created an entirely new system of pre-planning. Forget planning, pre-planning. Now, in my old job, we worked very hard with joint use lands in very technical ways with the school boards to ensure that we could build schools more quickly. In this government's estimation, it will take up to 8 years, even if the funding is found, for the very first one of the schools under the School Acceleration Program to be built. Wow. That's gaslighting in the extreme. For this government to be able to say we allocated $8.6 billion, but we didn't budget a penny to actually do it, is beyond reasonableness, and Albertans deserve to know the truth. How did we get here? Let's be clear. Teachers and parents have been talking about the issues of class size and complexity for a long time. This government in 2019 chose to stop reporting on class sizes because they didn't want us to know. They didn't want us to know how bad things were getting. But brave teachers and brave parents across the province told us the truth. They told us what was really happening. In fact, I remember when I was running for this job, the member for Edmonton-Glenora and I had quite a tiff at one of our debates on this very issue. She argued that class sizes should be in collective agreements. I said they should be in legislation. She was right. I was wrong. I don't say that very often. But the point is, that was 2 years ago. We knew that this was on the table. And yet this government chose to ignore that. The teachers were very clear. And although the government has spent millions of dollars of taxpayers' money on misinformation, telling people the teachers don't know what they want, the teachers haven't been clear in what they're talking about, the teachers were very clear. They've said from the beginning that issues of class size and complexity should be baked into the collective agreement. I knew that. I knew that when I was running for this job. Again, malice or incompetence. The government either didn't know that, incompetence, or they deliberately chose to ignore it, malice. Those are the only options here. But even giving them the benefit of the doubt, even assuming that their thumb-on-the-scale bargaining process, which was never bargaining in good faith, not from the beginning, even assuming that they just didn't know, there was a pretty big clue. Pretty big clue was when the teachers overwhelmingly rejected the offer in the spring. That meant that the government had bought itself some time. The teachers chose not to enact their strike mandate. The government had all summer to negotiate a better deal. They didn't. They didn't. They took the summer off. They took a summer vacation. There wasn't a single negotiating session held during the summer. And then what happened? Well, perhaps the government felt they were playing chicken with the teachers and they would never actually strike. Perhaps they felt once school was in session, things would calm down. That's incompetence. Or more likely, they wanted there to be a strike. They engineered a strike. They thought that this would ruin all public support for the teachers at the bargaining table. And they went back to the teachers with the same deal. They went back to the teachers with the same deal, except with a free COVID shot thrown in. A COVID shot that should have been free for all Albertans anyway, by the way. Did the minister seriously think that the teachers could be bought off with a $110 COVID shot? Did he seriously believe that they would get any different results than the result they got in the spring? If he believed it, incompetence. If he knew what was going to happen, as we all did, malice. Those are really the only options here. And both of those look bad. And now, we find ourselves in a situation where the government plays its last card. And it is so scared of that last card that it used a standing order under this legislature that's been on the books since 1916 and has never before been used. Why? What are they scared of? What kind of debate do they not want? They know what's going to happen. Why need to ram this through and silence the voices of dissent? Is it because they don't want to hear them? Is it because they're scared? Is it because they're worried that people will organize? Well, I hate to tell you this, Mr. Speaker, but people are organized. People already know. And if any member opposite actually believes that this is going to end tonight, they are very, very wrong. In fact, I would argue that every member opposite will rue this day. They will rue this day because they will say to themselves, that was the day we lost the faith of Albertans. That was the day we massively overplayed our hand. That was the day when we woke people up. And the worst part of this, Mr. Speaker, is they could have got what they wanted without any of this. And in fact, I would say to the members opposite, you should rue the day that the Premier and her cabinet put you in this awful position. Because to be clear, the government had the power to force the teachers back to work without any legislation. They can do that under the Labour Code. The government had the power, as has been done in the past, to pass legislation without the notwithstanding clause, and quite frankly, every single time the government passes a law, they pass the law with the confidence that it is constitutional, or I hope that they would never present it in front of this House. And the Premier, as herself many, many times, said the courts are the supreme arbiters of people's rights and what is constitutional. So we are to take that what we're at today is very simply an acknowledgement that the government knows this is unconstitutional and they don't care. And Albertans deserve so much better than that. This government had months to understand the overcrowding of classrooms, of growing class complexity, of unfit learning conditions for students. But instead, they engineered this strike, and they made the biggest mistake of their political careers. If I may, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to share with you just a few of the thousands and thousands and thousands of notes that we have received from parents and teachers across this province. Jillian from Edmonton. I've been a teacher and principal for 32 years in public education, and I am heartbroken with the current direction of this government. The intentional dismantling of our public systems is criminal. Kristen from Calgary. I'm extremely concerned about the government's push to send teachers back to work this week without any meaningful changes to teacher working conditions in classrooms. 85% of my students speak a language other than English at home. It's near impossible to plan for a room of 32 kids, many of whom do not have a full command of English, and yet I am somehow expected to teach the full curriculum every year. This one's from Brian in Calgary, directly contradicting something that the minister said earlier in question period when he suggested that class sizes don't matter above the age of grade 3. Recent 21st century studies from 2011 to 2024 have found that students who have had multiple opportunities to learn in smaller class sizes have improved non-cognitive skills in comparison to students who are consistently in larger class sizes. They have also found that adults who had smaller class sizes when they were younger were more likely to complete post-secondary schooling, have higher wages, have home ownership, and improved quality of life as adults. And to what effect were these benefits? There was an 18 to 20% net benefit compared to the money invested in promoting smaller class sizes. Yet we had a minister stand up earlier today and say, maybe it works for kindergarten kids if the classes are really, really small. Beyond that, it doesn't really matter. The evidence is not there. The evidence is very clear that we are hurting students. Let's get to some more. Amy from Calgary. If you want what's best for students, properly fund public education. If you want what's best for parents, properly fund public education. If you want what's best for teachers, properly fund public education. Here's what causes real irreparable harm to Alberta students, teachers, and families. 1. Refusing to even track class size. Refusing to discuss ratios. 2. Threatening back-to-work legislation and use of the notwithstanding clause. 3. Underfunding the system to such a degree that there literally aren't even enough physical rooms for a limit of 30 students per room. 4. Cutting PUF and FSCD funding for kids with disabilities. That's another thing that this government has become famous for. Teachers aren't corrupt and we're not greedy. We just want to talk about class size and proper funding for our students. From a parent, this is from Chinko. I'm writing to you for your response to the teachers' strike. How are you going to address your constituents about the issues that need to be resolved in Alberta education? Students navigating Alberta's education system have faced a year and a half of intermittent learning due to COVID. Teachers have spent the last 4 years rebuilding learning communities. Both groups are discovering and dealing with the new realities of education after the epidemic. This has created new mental health challenges that revolve around learning gaps, deficiency in social skills, and a volatile dependency to screens. Some of us may have that. These are new issues. Combine them with the old issues of Alberta falling behind all other provinces in funding while being one of the fastest growing provinces. Why do you think it's acceptable not to help with the burdens your Alberta students are dealing with daily? With the changing dynamics in the job market between the corporate implementation of AI and the shifting fiscal reliability of working with fossil fuel companies, how do you condone adding extra barriers to learning by not addressing the complexities in learning and the overcrowding of learning? Why do you support being last in provincial funding for an essential service that feeds the Alberta economic engine? We elect you. You are our voice. If you are not supporting the needs in education being spelled out to you, then you are clearly only holding office to benefit yourself. You do not care about the educational needs of your constituents. You do not care for the success of your province. You do not care for the future of your country. Let's pause on that one for a moment and talk about that provincial funding number. We have gone from every credible source to the last in the country in per-student funding. Once again, this was obvious, and it was predictable, and the government had so much time to act. Instead, the government under the previous minister chose to stop reporting on class sizes. This is the same government that at the very last minute cancelled the provincial achievement tests in grade 6 because they were scared of the results, because they knew their new curriculum would have led to massive failure among the grade 6 students. Now, most governments, I would hope, maybe I'm too new at this, Mr. Speaker, but most governments, I would hope, would want the information to be out there so that they could act on it, so that they could do something about it. This government, uniquely among governments I've seen, and listen, I've been a political watcher my whole life. I've been in political life myself in elected office for 15 years. And I have never seen a government like this. I have never seen a government so unwilling to share data, so unwilling to accept responsibility, so unwilling to make change. I've never seen it. And I ask myself, how did Albertans end up with a government so unwilling to govern? A government so unwilling to roll up its sleeves and do the hard work. A government that lets problems fester for so long that they have to use rules that haven't been used since 1916, that they have to become the first government in the history of Alberta to attempt to use the notwithstanding clause preemptively, that they have to jam and ram that through in one night. How did we get here? We got here because we've had a government for all this time, for 6 whole years. You know, they love to stand up over there and talk about the record of the New Democrat government from 2015 to 2019. They've been in power for 6 years. The Premier has been the Premier for 3 years. And I hope that the members opposite all ask themselves, is there a single Albertan who is better off today than they were in 2019? Is the education system better today than it was in 2019? Is the healthcare system better than it was in 2019? Is unemployment better than it was in 2019? Is job creation better than it was in 2019? Is inflation better than it was in 2019? Under this government, unemployment has risen by 3 points in the absence of a global recession. Youth unemployment has never been higher. Young men face a 1 in 5 unemployment rate. They don't know how to manage the economy, they don't know how to manage their budget, and they sure as heck don't know how to manage public services. Let's keep going. This is from a parent in Edmonton who sent a note to the MLA for Edmonton-McClung. Dear MLA, I'm tired of seeing the UCP government fail to act to get a fair deal for kids and their teachers. Great teachers are leaving the profession because they are overwhelmed and under-supported in the classroom. Instead of working with teachers on real solutions for our schools, the UCP government keeps trying to distract from the issues. Well, yes, they do. Attempting to pit parents and teachers against each other. Let's talk about this one for a minute. Recent studies from the Alberta Teachers Association show that as many as 50% of new teachers leave the profession in the first 5 years. We can hire 3,000 new teachers, sure. It's not in the legislation, but we'll trust the government that that's really what they want to do. How do you fill the bucket when there's a giant hole in the bucket? I used to love talking to teachers, I really did. I loved hearing about what they did in public schools. I loved hearing about the students and the way that they managed those students. Nowadays, with apologies to anyone who might be hearing this, I hate talking to teachers. And the reason is because the situations are so dire. I still love the teachers. I still love everything they do. But the situations they face are so dire. A year ago, I spoke with a young woman in her 3rd year of teaching. And she said to me, this is not at all what I thought it would be. She said to me that her principal had done a budget PowerPoint for her school, for all the faculty. And the first line of the PowerPoint presentation on the top page was, No one is coming to help you. No one is coming to help you. And she looked at me and she said, got 35 students in my grade 3 class. More will come over the course of the year. We're not funded for them. There are students in my class with special needs. There's one student in my class who really cannot be more than an arm's length away from a grown-up at any time. And I have no education assistant. And she looked at me and she said, I'm still young. I don't have kids of my own. Why am I doing this? I go back to school. I get trained in a different profession. Heck, with an education degree, I can go work in corporate training. Maybe I can go work at a private school. And I won't have to deal with all of this. 50% of people leaving in the first 5 years in any other industry would be a crisis. If 50% of welders left in the first 5 years, if 50% of accountants left in the first 5 years, we would talk about nothing else in this legislature. But somehow it's okay if 50% of teachers leave in the first 5 years. And no matter how many teachers we say we're going to hire, that bucket will empty faster than we could ever fill it. Let's go to another one. Letter from Robin in Lethbridge. She's a parent. Teachers are striking because they have been pushed to the brink by years of underfunding, overcrowded classrooms, and disregard for their professional expertise. Forcing them back to work is not a solution. It is an insult. It sends a clear message that this government values control over collaboration and power over people. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to believe that's true. I really don't. I know many of the members opposite before politics and in politics, and I know that every one of them has entered politics because they wanted to do better by their neighbours, because they wanted to have craft a better Alberta. That's not what we see, Mr. Speaker. When we strip down this government, a government consistently unwilling to roll up its sleeves and do the hard work, a government consistently interested in scoring political points rather than getting work done, a government that consistently doesn't think about the implications of its terrible decisions or what they mean to real people. I have to ask myself that same question that Robin from Lethbridge is asking. What does this government value? When we strip this government down to its essence, what is there beyond a need for power, power, and more power? I can give you the answer on this side, Mr. Speaker. I know these people very well. In this group of people, economists, lawyers, public servants, teachers, social workers, small business people, entrepreneurs, even a geologist. We come from a very different very different backgrounds. We have surprisingly different political inclinations once in a while. But when you strip us down to our essence, what you see is a real desire to make the province better. What you see is a group of people who believe in the dignity of every other person lucky enough to share this land. And what you have here is an unflinching and unwavering desire to improve this province. It's not about power, and it never will be. Dallas from Mayor Thorpe. As an adult, I am now facing the devastating reality that my provincial government and my representatives have failed multiple generations of students. These appalling classroom conditions still exist and even have been normalized. This government broke public education real fast. The good news is we can fix it real fast. The bad news is we have no choice but to fix it real fast. The minister was correct when he stood up earlier and said that learning loss that students are facing can cause irreparable harm. We know this. We know that the learning loss that we're seeing will take a long time to fix and could stay with people throughout their lives. But here's the thing. Kids could have been back in school. Kids could have never left school. Kids never had to have this 4 weeks of learning loss had the government only done its job. This next one is from Brian in Lethbridge. And I'm going to apologize in advance because this one's going to be hard for me to read. Public education in Alberta is being held together by the unsustainable efforts of teachers. Teachers who are overburdened and undersupported. The system is breaking down. Students with additional needs are not receiving the support and tools necessary to succeed. Meanwhile, overcrowded classrooms are limiting teachers' ability to create the effective learning environments that every student deserves. As a personal example, my daughter has dyslexia and ADHD. She was unable to read by grade 3, not due to teacher incompetence, but because her teachers, overwhelmed with large class sizes and minimal support, could not give her the attention she required. I urge you to oppose the use of the notwithstanding clause in matters that affect the rights of teachers. Its use in this context undermines constitutionally protected rights and sets a dangerous precedent for all workers in Alberta. Stripping teachers of their rights jeopardizes not only their safety, but also the well-being of the students they serve. Now, I heard a member opposite get super excited when I said, I hate talking to teachers these days. And I'm glad that the member was super excited. And I hope he heard the next sentence. And the next sentence was because they are forced to work in appalling conditions. So I disagree with Brian a little bit here, because he says the system is close to collapse. In too many communities, in too many schools across this province, the system has collapsed. It has collapsed under this government. And it is only one thing: the strong backs, the unwavering devotion, the sweat, and the strength of the people who go to work in those schools every single day. It's the only thing that's kept us going. This winter, I went up to Fort McMurray, and I spent an unseasonably warm winter's day in Fort McMurray on the line with educational workers. Let's talk about them for a minute. This government allowed the education assistants in Fort McMurray to stand in the cold of a Fort McMurray winter for 4 months. Shame. And let's be clear. These women, 85% of them are women, and let's be further clear, if 85% of them were men, we wouldn't have been paying them poverty-level wages.
That's right.
These full-time, unionized public servants under this government were earning $28,000 a year.
Shame.
And I want to share with you a story of one of them, and she's asked me to share this story. She walked up to me and she said, "You know, I didn't stumble into the job of being an EA. I went to school for this. This is my dream job. And 28 years ago, when I was hired by the Fort McMurray School District, it was the best day of my life. I knew that I'd be able to do what my passion was. I knew I'd be able to make a huge difference for special needs kids. And I knew I'd be able to do it working for a government that valued the work I was doing." In 28 years, before she stood on those cold, cold Fort McMurray roads through that winter, her salary had been increased by $7. 28 years. Single mom herself. And she said to me, "You know what? I work full time. I'm a public servant. I belong to a union. And every single morning, when my kids are packing their lunch, I have to say to them, honey, today you can have an apple or an orange. I'm sorry, but you can't have both. This is the legacy of this government. It's not about making life better for people. It's about forcing single moms to ration the fruit they give their kids. Recent studies showed that 40% of families in Calgary are facing food insecurity under this government. 40%. More than half of Albertans are less than one paycheck away from not being able to feed their kids. And this government systematically wants more and more public servants to join that group. Let's go to another one. This is Joyce. Joyce happens to be the parent of a grade 11 student at Sir Winston Churchill High School. I happen to have a niece who is a grade 11 student at Sir Winston Churchill High School. And so I asked her to check this one. It is, in fact, true. Recently, I learned that my daughter's chemistry class has 67 students being taught by one teacher. Now, to be fair, there were supposed to be 2 teachers in that classroom, but they couldn't do it. 67 students being taught by one teacher. This is deeply troubling. With such a large number of students in a single classroom, I worry about how students can effectively manage the class, provide individualized support, and maintain a high standard of education. Another class she attends has over 40 students, which is still far beyond what I would consider conducive to quality learning. I happen to know this school pretty well. I've had 2 nieces graduate from there. They're brilliant, they've done incredibly well, and they benefited from an outstanding education and outstanding teachers. They've never had a cafeteria because the cafeteria is used for instructional space. My younger niece times her trips to her locker so that she doesn't get crushed by the students in that school because it's so overcrowded. And this is not a school that's in a brand new suburb or a place of high growth. The school was there when the Premier and I went to high school. And yet, this government has allowed this to happen. 67 students in a chemistry class in high school at one of the very best high schools in the province. And when you say one of the very best high schools in the province for so many years, you could also say that automatically means one of the best schools in the world. And you just can't say it anymore under this government. Another parent from Calgary writes, and I really want to dwell on this one for a moment as well. Public education is not a luxury. It is the foundation of a strong and equitable society. It ensures that the children of immigrants, of working families, of every background can succeed, contribute, and support Alberta's future. If we fail to fund it properly, we're not just hurting schools, we're hurting Alberta's economy, its communities, and its next generation of leaders. That's Lisa. I've talked already about the importance of public education in building a better society. I want to be extraordinarily clear. Our children's education should never depend on the price of oil. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. This government has gone from a $9 billion surplus to a $10 billion and counting deficit. Shame. This government, for the first time in generations, crafted a budget that relies more on oil and gas royalties than less. They made us more dependent on oil and gas. This government wrote a budget that requires $75 oil to even have a $7 billion deficit. These are choices, folks. Mr. Speaker, these are choices this government has made. It's not accidental. And when the Premier pleads poverty, when the Premier says to teachers, there's enough money to give you a raise or hire new teachers, that's not an accident. That's not something that just happened. Those are results of deliberate choices by this government. We know how wasteful this government is. We know how this government refuses to actually spend money on the priorities of actual Albertans. We know from Justice Wyant's recent report that hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars have been wasted on private healthcare contracts that didn't go through proper authorizations, that didn't go through proper procedures, that allegedly had money flowing in directions it ought not to have been flowing in. And we know that all happens while public operating rooms remain empty. We know that this government has, for the first time in Canadian history, chosen to fund the construction of private schools with public money.
Shame.
We know that this government has a record of waste and mismanagement and fraud that we have never seen before in Alberta. These are choices this government has made. They made choices to spend money on great deals for their friends and take money away from students that need it. I want to go to the next letter. This is from Joe in Airdrie. Teachers don't want to strike. They would rather spend their time in the classroom teaching their students. They see education as a public service. They take pride in seeing kids light up when they learn something new. They care deeply about their school communities, and their greatest wish is to be remembered as a great teacher. I'm also an educator. I spent many years standing in front of classrooms at the university level. That was my job before I got into politics. And I can tell you that what Joe says to us is entirely true. You don't do this job because you get the summers off, even though members opposite intimate that. You don't do this job because it's cushy. This job is so far from cushy. You do this job because every now and then a student makes you so proud. You do this job because every now and then a student who's been struggling will just get it. You know, my world is different than the member for Edmonton Northwest's world as a teacher. Mine were a bit older, probably not as smart as his.
True.
But I used to teach finance. It's a notoriously difficult class. The member from Edmonton Northwest and I went through it together. It is a hard class. And for most students, at some point the light comes on. For the lucky few, it comes on before the first midterm. The Minister of Edmonton, or the member for Calgary Northwest, the Minister of Indigenous Relations, is one of those smart students. She figured it out. For most students, it comes on sometime between the first midterm and the final exam. And for the unlucky few students, it comes on the second time you take the course. But it comes on. But it comes on. And when we see that light come on, when we see the student go, I get it. Wow, that's how a mortgage works. That's how corporations issue debt and equity. That's what that really means. That's how the system works. That's how capitalism works. That is a great moment. And I know that my colleagues on this side who are teachers and all the other teachers in the province have that story every single day. The story of how things could be better. I have lots more parent and teacher letters, but I want to flip to another topic here. And I want to talk about the notwithstanding clause. Today, the UCP is using the notwithstanding clause preemptively for the first time in the history of Alberta. This is deeply shameful.
Unforgivable.
And we should be ashamed of it. We have a premier who says she loves freedom. She says it all the time. In the throne speech, we called Alberta the freest jurisdiction in Canada. Premier has a tattoo. I think it reads, I don't actually speak ancient Babylonian. But theoretically, it's liberty. It's actually the symbol of a right-wing agitator organization in the United States. Yet this government has systematically stripped away freedoms and stripped away liberty from Albertans. They stripped away the right of property owners to put what they like on their property. They stripped away the right of medical professionals to prescribe and give what they believe to be the best treatment for their patients. They stripped away the right for parents to agree to what they believe to be the right medical treatment for their students. They tried to strip away the right to read. Minister of Education walked that one back pretty quick. In fact, in the same afternoon. One morning he said that books about menstruation and puberty would not be allowed, and that afternoon he said, oh, sorry, they are allowed. Are you there, God? It's the minister. So, and now they want to strip away more rights from more people. Earlier this summer, the Minister of Justice stood up and defended the use of Bill 21 in Quebec. I'll remind all of you that Quebec is the only jurisdiction in the world that says people of certain faiths cannot have certain jobs. That devout Muslims, Sikhs, and Jewish people cannot be teachers in public schools. It's the only jurisdiction in the world. And this government, instead of standing up and saying, we would never do that, we don't believe in that, stood up and defended Quebec's use of the notwithstanding clause for that.
Shame.
That's the government the members opposite chose to belong to. They did that. They did that. And I wonder how they then speak to their Muslim, to their Sikh, to their Jewish people, to their constituents about the fact that they defended that. And this summer I said, well, that is a strange thing to do. That is a strange thing to do politically. It's certainly going to cost them a number of seats, and I can tell you which ones, and I'm looking over at some of them now. It is a very strange thing to do. But why are they doing it, I asked myself. And that's when I realized the horrible truth. That they're starting, for the first time in history, against workers and against their unions. They have signaled that their next use of the notwithstanding clause will be against vulnerable children, and the one after that will be against healthcare workers. That's the government the members opposite have chosen to join. A government that systematically takes away people's freedoms. The first government in Alberta to say, we don't believe in the Charter of Rights. We don't believe that human rights are for every human. That's this government.
Shame.
Shame.
A former premier in this chamber, a fellow I got to know pretty well over the years, sometimes on the opposite side of picket lines, in 2003 faced enormous pressure to use the notwithstanding clause to overturn the Supreme Court's decision in Vreen versus Alberta, the decision that enshrined same-sex rights into the Constitution. He was tempted. He was sorely tempted. His party was pressuring him. He was getting all kinds of letters from citizens saying, you must do this. And Ralph Klein said no. Ralph Klein said some things are more important. Ralph Klein watched a protest on the steps of this legislature, and he found it to be so hateful that he had to say no. No premier of Alberta has used the notwithstanding clause preemptively until today. Until today.
Shame.
And not just doing it today, but denying debate on it today. I want to share with you another quote here. This is not from a parent or a teacher. This is from a legislator. In fact, it's from the person who was the architect of the notwithstanding clause. It was from the person who, at the table in 1982, said that this is what it would take to pass the Constitution. He never used it. And in fact, 10 years after, he said, I believe in the notwithstanding clause, I still do. But he said, there are 3 areas in which you should be able to use it. First, the legislature needs to spell out the exact purpose of its use. It can't just use it preemptively, it has to say why, and it has to talk about how it's time limited. Second, a simple majority should not be enough. It should require at least 60% of the members of a legislature to use the notwithstanding clause. Third, preemptive judicial review should be disallowed. The notwithstanding clause should only be used after the courts have had the opportunity to declare whether a law is constitutional or not. Perhaps I'll table this report when tablings are once again allowed, since we couldn't do it today. But that was a lecture from the Honourable Peter Lougheed. Peter Lougheed himself, the architect of the notwithstanding clause, would have strongly opposed the way that it is being used today. The throne speech called us the freest jurisdiction in Canada, and literally in the next day of the legislature sitting, the government has signaled that they don't care about people's fundamental human rights and freedoms. This is probably the hardest letter that I've gotten. I don't have a name, but I know this is someone who teaches at Rocky View County Schools. To those with positions of power, I'm sad that this is my chosen profession. I've wanted to teach since I was in grade 6, but this is not what I've been looking forward to all these years. I'm exhausted. I'm irritable. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I don't deserve to feel this way. I'm trying to fill my students' buckets with my very own, very limited, very empty bucket. My family doesn't deserve this. I am the shell of a human at home. I cannot give them the love, attention, and patience they deserve because I spent it all day putting out fires. I don't have support for my 2 high-needs kids, and it's not fair to my other 25 kids to not have my attention and for them to always be on guard. We are all done. We are all not okay. Folks, this doesn't just happen. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't just happen. It's not something that we have to live with because it just happened. It's not something that we can blame on the federal government or 91,000 new people coming or inexplicably on temporary foreign workers and international students who generally don't have small children that they bring with them. This is the result of bad government policy, which takes us back to where we started. Malice or incompetence. Malice or incompetence. At the end of the day, the situation that that teacher in Rocky View County is feeling is something caused by government policy. So, Mr. Speaker, what should we have done rather than being here this evening having this debate? We should have seen this coming. We shouldn't have stopped the construction of new schools in 2019 as the UCP did. We should have focused quickly on complexity and on class size. We should have been able to make a better deal with teachers. We should have been able to avoid work action. We shouldn't have locked the teachers out, as this government has done. But more important, we should have made a promise to the students and the parents and the teachers in this community. A simple promise that we believe in Peter Lougheed's dream, that we believe in having the best public education system in the world. That is something we will strive for, that is something we will work for, that is something that we will do. The minister, in his introduction, in his moving of this motion, talked about how he respects teachers, he respects students, and he respects parents. If he really does, I'm happy he's come to that revelation. But in reality, real respect for these folks would have happened 6 years ago when this government took power. Real respect would have happened when we said we're going to build more classrooms, we're going to have more teachers, and we're going to make sure that every single student can succeed. I think back to that kid cleaning the toilets at the motels in Red Deer County and going to River Glen School, the county school, a school that had its own rodeo. I couldn't participate in that rodeo for I had no skills. No horse. The grease pig race was open to me, but I found it undignified. Mostly for the pig. And I saw a picture recently somebody sent me of me back then, dressed up in what an immigrant family thought a cowboy might dress like. And I remember when we left Red Deer and moved back to Calgary, going to Marlborough Elementary School. I remember being so happy and so lucky that I was accepted into the gifted program and going off there and meeting a bunch of freaks like me that allowed me to blossom. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in Marlborough, northeast Calgary. Not a lot of people have not a lot of hope for kids who grow up in Marlborough. I had 2 friends growing up. All 3 of us did our graduate school at the same institution. Every kid I went to school with has gone on to contribute to the community in extraordinary ways. That's all we're asking today. So as government members ask themselves, was this worth it? Was it worth tarnishing my political legacy to make this happen? I hope they remember one thing. Regardless of what happens today, it's not going to get better. We're returning teachers and students to the same broken system. And every single kid growing up in every single neighborhood, in every single town of this beautiful province deserves exactly what I got. Today's motion does not give them that. And if this motion passes in the wee hours of the day after being rammed through these terrible, terrible legislations because the government is scared of dissent and scared of debate, I hope every member remembers they will rue this day. Because this is the day this government finally, once and for all, broke faith with Albertans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.